sometimes.
I can attest. I crossed paths with him. It was like, what? Hey, what are you doing here?
Thank you so much. All right, we'll get started. We'd like to welcome everyone this afternoon here in our city chambers of Lindon City, this date of March 18th, 2024. I'd like to thank all my council members and staff that are here as well. And first order of business is to have an invocation by Councilmember Lincoln Jacobs, after which we will have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Lyle Lamoureux.
Our dear Father in heaven, we come before you this evening, grateful for the opportunity that we have to be gathered as a city council, grateful for our city staff that is collected here and our residents that are here. We're grateful for all those who put forth effort and energy in order to help our city run smoothly and be a wonderful place for its residents. We're so grateful, especially always, Father, for our emergency responders. Bless them as they go about their business, that they will be able to meet the emergency needs of our city residents. We pray that Spirit would be with us as we discuss the items on our agenda tonight. Help us to make those decisions that would be promoting and uplifting to everyone. And we offer this prayer to thee in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. So I invite all of you to stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will start with item number 1, our call to order and roll call. I'll just start here on my right.
Van Broderick, present.
Steve Stewart, present.
Carolyn Lundberg, present.
Cole Dudley, present.
Lincoln Jacobs, present.
Jay Coit, present.
All right, wonderful. Everyone's here. Item number 2 is presentations and announcements. If any council members have something different than what's in your regular planned council reports, comments, seeing none, we'll move forward to item number 3. This is an open session for public comment where we invite anyone here to address the council for an item that is not listed on the agenda. All right, seeing none needing to come forward at this time, we will move on to item number 5. This is our council reports, and you feel ready to kick us off. Thank you, Councilmember White.
I'll go quickly. We a couple updates from police, fire, EMS, a couple counterfeit $100 bills being used down at the Home Depot, mostly out-of-state offenders. Suspects were arrested. We were going to have a few of our officers here. They performed some off-duty acts of service. They, not even on their day on, are out and about helping Lindon residents and just appreciate that the police department is always out and about doing that. Had a couple of different business owners approach me on a fee from the fire department that changed and occurred. And I'm just wondering if we could if any of the other council members have had businesses approach them on that. Adam, I see you shaking your head. Maybe if I could just get some information on that. I don't know that it has to be in the council meeting, but it sounds like there's been a change and there's a pretty significant increase in the fee to our Lindon businesses for their annual fire inspection. And we could talk about it. I know we've got the budget. Maybe we touch on it in the budget, maybe later on in another agenda item, but that was brought up to me a couple times this week. And
we'll let you know now. So this is something we mentioned. It's been a few meetings ago, and Mike sent out some information, but he'll give you an update on where we're at. So.
Yeah, so Orem City is part of their proactive checking on businesses and inspecting their businesses. So about 6 or 8 months ago, we sent out a letter to all of our businesses, and we were Orem City was charging on a per square footage basis. So they were charging a lot more. Couple $100 could be for businesses. They came back and they were getting a lot of pushback on that. So they came back with a flat fee of $93.
Okay.
93 and a little bit of change. And so that happens once a year on their renewal. And so what they did, and we'll present this a little bit tonight in the business license fee study, but about 6 years ago, they did the same type of fee study and determined that at that time, it was about $80 or $84, I think it's in your report, that was their disproportionate inspection fee. And it's been increased now to about $93. And so that's why in your business license fee study, you see calls for service for police calls, but you don't see fire because Orem's already has their fee calculated and they're charging that as part of our business license renewal fee.
Does this include the inspection of the fire suppressant, fire extinguishers that businesses sometimes have to do?
It should,
Okay.
yes.
Okay,
So-
that's helpful. That's
Yeah.
good to know. That's all I have.
All right, Lincoln.
We're still looking for a parks technician, at least I think so, because our sign still says that we are.
That's another item we need to update, Lincoln. Thanks for that. They made an offer last week and that was accepted, so
Sweet.
we can take that down. I'll make a note of that.
We have our annual Easter egg hunt. That's going to be Saturday, March 30th at 9 a.m. at Pheasant Brook. And we also have this Easter egg citywide hunt. And that information will come out, Alan tells me, March 30th that morning. And that's where the Pheasant Brook Easter egg hunt is for 12 and younger. So this one is for probably everyone at any age. If you can move, you can participate. And he'll have clues on our Lindon social media, and you can go out and try and find the hidden gems that he's going to place throughout the city.
One of the
Sounds like
many
it'll be
fun
fun.
centennial ideas that he's come up with.
That sounds really fun.
May have to be an ongoing tradition. The adults really get into it, finding the prize.
I'm going to be out of town, so I need a good report from some of you other city council people to help me know how it went. We did not have a board meeting with the North Point Solid Waste. We did receive plans for a new Bank of America building, new building for Bank of America at 564 North State. That's just south of Lowbrook Cells, I think. So that'll be coming. And our new building inspector, I had this in my notes last city council, but I must have gotten flustered because I didn't mention it. But Myron Woodruff, he comes from Highland City in his first day, so he's replacing Gary Hoagland. So he started 2 weeks ago. He comes from Highland City. And just looking forward to the Dowdle Puzzle unveiling on March 25th. Super excited for that. That's it.
For the communities that care, they're holding their annual Key Leaders meeting this week and then their regular meeting as well. So that's where their energies have been placed. We've already had conversation about upcoming centennial events. The Historic Commission's working on their centennial activity, a large scavenger hunt. And just a last reminder, if you have any recommendations for Heath on where to plant the centennial tree and put the bench, just to email him any of your ideas about where that might be.
Great. The Key Leader lunch is tomorrow.
Yep, at noon.
11, or is it noon?
I believe it's at noon.
Yeah, I need to move that on my calendar, or I'd be really early. That might be good. But I'm certainly certain, any of the council members, if you have time to come, love to have you come and learn about the community's care and what they're working on. All right, thank you so much. Go ahead, Steve.
We had our last youth council meeting this past week, and it was fun to watch them kind of wrap up. And now we're anticipating our new council. We, as I mentioned last time, we have applications out. There's a QR code online at the city site that you can access. The deadline is April 12th, and we'd love to see a number of our youth apply for that. And so anybody who knows anybody in high school age grade levels 9 through 12, encourage them to apply.
Do we put that notice at the Pleasant Grove High School for sure?
Yeah, during our meeting this last week, I asked them to go to Timpanogos and Pleasant Grove and any of the other high schools, which are many, that were represented by our students, and also their government teachers. And so hopefully that'll spread the word a little more.
Great.
Just one item, this Thursday from 10 to 11 a.m. is the EDA Land Planning Consultant meeting for the cemetery expansion project. That's a pretty good switch there. That's held at the Public Works Building. That's not a meeting I can attend. If anybody is available, maybe let me know. And so this Thursday, 10 to 11, not a
Know
huge
your
deal.
alternate, can we look and see who your official alternate is on the council assignments?
You were asking me, Mayor? Sorry.
Yes,
I will
sorry.
look that up, so give me a second.
All right. Do you have anything else to
Nope,
add?
that'll be it.
Okay. Great, and then while Adam's looking that up, we can revisit that really quickly. We had, all of us hopefully participated in our local caucus nights. It was an interesting citywide thing, had a good turnout. Obviously, with a presidential election year, people get a little more involved. And if you all got a copy of the Daily Herald article that was written about our centennial celebration for Monday night. So I'd love to encourage all of you to send emails, put it on your social media. We want to make sure everyone in the community is invited, as well as people even outside of the community. Besides the dowdle unveiling, the real crux of the evening is just our centennial celebration itself. There's going to be food and a live band, and we just hope to have everyone there, all your families, all your friends. So it's a pretty great celebration. And then we have a citywide cleanup coming up with the dumpsters coming out citywide, April 6th through the 15th. And I'm wondering, will we have those in the same locations as we typically have in the past?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I know a lot of people are asking about that already. So, and then really quickly, I had one other quick question. It's escaping me, but do you have the alternate for Van?
Steve.
And I have the exact same conflict.
Okay, so it's up for grabs.
Steve's alternate is Cole.
Okay, what
time?
I'm in. I'll cover Thursday. Sorry.
Lincoln County?
It's this,
Public Works, 10 to 11. Thank you.
thank you so much. All right, and then we'll move forward now to item number 5, our administrator's report.
Thanks, Mayor. I think the only thing there, just 2 items, I just needed some feedback on. Our next regular meeting is April 1st, and that is Alpine School District Spring Break. Just wanted to make sure that we'll have a quorum. Any of you
I'm
planning
here.
to be gone?
What's the date again? Sorry.
First.
You're not tricking us, are you?
I am not tricking you, sorry.
You know what? Last time we were on April Fools, we did something pretty fun that night. Do you remember?
Maybe we'll have to resurrect that, so.
Okay, we'll have to talk.
Sounds like everybody should be here, okay.
I'm tentative.
You're a maybe,
but we're
but
gonna
we'll
do
have
something,
enough.
but
We'll
probably
have
not
at
till
least-
later in the week, so.
okay, we just need at least 3 of you, so it sounds like we'll be okay there, so. And then just a reminder, this Thursday at 6:30, we have an invite for those that are on Center Street, having an open house here in this room. We'll have a presentation by our engineers to overview the project, kind of where we're at and what's upcoming with the road repaving. And then we'll break off into groups and talk to individual neighbors about some of the improvements in front of their property, so. So you're not required to be to that, but if you'd like to, you're welcome. So that's all I have, Mayor. Oh, let me follow up. Lincoln said he had somebody ask about the secondary water when it comes on. And for those that are newer here, you might start to get that question also. It is typically late April into early May. So it's still at least a month out. So a few days in the 60s and 70s, and we always get this question. Yeah. Thank you.
Adam, could I just jump in and mention something. Last Friday, a U.S. Supreme Court case came down that ruled that public officials, even if you're using your private social media accounts to make comments regarding items over which you have direct control, once you decide to go into that realm of commenting on things that you have control on, not, if it's an election, if it's a national issue, that doesn't apply. But if it's talking about something the city's doing, you cannot block users' comments, or that's an intrusion on First Amendment speech. That by using your personal social media, you're choosing to make that a public forum. And that's a case that just came down. I will be doing a little memo. I haven't had a chance to do it in depth yet, but just want to give you a heads up about that on your personal social media. It applies to our city website, our city accounts as well, and I'll have a memo for Adam. But just be aware of that if you're inclined to comment about something directly that this council has authority over. We may be opening a door to letting anybody make comments, whatever comments those might be. So.
What about if they're breaking the stated community standards of that page or group?
Yeah, those are the details I'm gonna have to drill down on. I mean,
Because most groups do,
Right.
vet.
If you've got a filter that's automatically filtering stuff, I think there might be an exception to that. But if you're going in, there were 2 cases that went up, and in both cases, the administrator of one was a city administrator, another was, I think, a council member. They went in and affirmatively blocked the comments. And
it was people trolling them. I mean,
Right,
It
and-
was significant comments about just basically, I don't agree with your position or stances on these issues.
Right.
And they blocked them, and that is the concern.
And the Supreme Court said that was blocking a First Amendment right to express their opinions on public issues. So if you've got somebody who's just, selling stuff, come buy my stuff, that's maybe not, doesn't have the same level of protection as commenting on political and direct things. Just wanted to give you a heads up about that. I'll be emailing each one of you a little memo on that case so that you're better informed on what you're doing.
So if we were to make a comment like, super excited tomorrow for the Dowdle puzzle unveiling, that's one, right? I mean,
Potentially.
Or is that not?
Yeah.
Okay.
The council has direct control over that event, and so, but
Appreciate
but again,
that.
I have to drill down on that Supreme Court case. I haven't read it all the way through. I just enough to make me nervous. So
I'm so glad that you have the desire to read it all the way through.
so thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item number 6. This is the approval of the minutes from March 4th. If you've had a moment to review, and any comments, additions, changes? If you have none, I'd entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Jacobs, seconded by Councilmember Stewart. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Thank you so much. All right, this takes us to item number 7, the consent agenda portion of our night, which these are items that do not require public comment or discussion. And tonight we do have a proclamation declaring March 25th, 2024 as Lindon Day in commemoration of our 100th year of incorporation as a city in the state of Utah. So leading up to our centennial celebration next Monday, if you would all favor me with the opportunity to read this really quickly. I thought this was a well-written statement by staff. Whereas the city of Lindon was officially incorporated on March 24th, 1924, and is celebrating its 100th anniversary, and whereas the Lindon area was settled as an outcropping of Pleasant Grove by several families locating in a string of homes along what is now State Street, leading to the name of the area as Stringtown. As the settlement grew, the area later became known as Lindon, named after a linden tree where a community mailbag was hung. And whereas on February 21st, 1924, a meeting was held to commence proceedings to incorporate Lindon into a town for the purpose of bonding to cover the cost of installing a culinary water system. On March 24th, 1924, the town received approval by the Utah County Commission to incorporate. And whereas Lindon residents have a long and rich history, and the Lindon community continues to hold fast to its traditions and efforts to beautify and enhance our community. And whereas the mayor, city council, and employees envisioned a year-long celebration, and this special proclamation marking the centennial anniversary of the great city of Lindon. And whereas various community activities are planned throughout the year in honor of our city and its great history. And whereas the city of Lindon welcomes all community organizations, businesses, and residents to celebrate this centennial and participate in the festivities throughout the year 2024. Now therefore, I, Carolyn O. Lundberg, Mayor, hereby proclaim and honor March 24th, 2024 as the official 100th anniversary of incorporation of the city of Lindon, and mark this day as Lindon Day, in which residents can honor our past, present, and future. I wish to congratulate the community on this exciting mark in history and look forward to what the next 100 years may hold for Lindon. Let's give a little round of applause for Lindon.
And I hope all of us can be there
Absolutely.
in the next
That'd be
100
great.
years.
Oh. Ooh, better take our vitamins. All right. All right, so this proclamation requires a motion, does it not?
We just had that under the consent agenda.
As a consent
so-
agenda item
Yep,
in
so
that
it'll just
category.
be a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda item as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Stewart, seconded by Councilmember Hoyt. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Okay, we're on to item number 8. This is a presentation and discussion item of our business license fee study. So I'd like to welcome our representatives from LRB to come forward with our Community Development Director, Michael Florence.
That was good timing, Fred.
All right, thanks, Mayor and council members. Last year, we decided to look at our business license fees. It's been at least 10 years or longer that we've updated or at least evaluated our fees for our businesses. And so we hired LRB, Lewis, Robertson, Birmingham.
It's
Public,
changed.
yeah, I'm still used to the
Yeah, the
old
old one.
acronym, but this is Fred Philpott, and he's the one that's looked at our study and done the evaluation for business license fees. So this evening, we want to make a presentation to you. Fred's going to go through the process of how we evaluated those fees, and then at a future meeting, we'll come back with some proposed fees for you. But we would like some information this evening, some feedback, and on the fees that we collected. And so Marcy Elfin is also our business license clerk and works downstairs with me. And so she handles this stuff day in and day out, and we appreciate all that she does, and she'll be able to answer some of the specific questions for us about business license fees.
She's one of the wonderful, friendly voices when you call a department, and a longtime Lindon resident.
That's
so
right.
Great.
Great. Well, with that, I'm gonna turn the time over to Fred.
Yeah. Can I plug in
Yes.
presentation? Is that okay? You go that route?
I don't know, we just went through some training about plugging in USB drives, didn't we? And the viruses. I did my training, Adam.
Is it something you can email to us really quick?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Do you wanna send it to Adam?
Or I can plug in my laptop if you want. Or is it better just to email? Oh.
Yeah, just, so it's acowie@linden.gov. Speaking of which.
You just said, you gave me a different
So,
one.
While Fred's sending that to me, we will be contacting you this week, I believe, our IT guy, about switching from .org to .gov. So just a heads up, that's a legitimate thing. So that, just as a reminder, this was legislation that was passed last year that the .gov domain has some stricter protections. We had to go through a lot of hoops to get it registered, and it's supposed to be more secure. And so
So is it working now, though? I mean, you use that
he's
email?
going department by department, and so our administration started this week. Our old email will forward for another year or so, just in case, but then eventually we'll get to the website shifting as well. And so I'm gonna need to steal that mouse back from you.
What email address should I send that to?
Cowie, A-C-O-W-E.
I'm using mine. Sorry about that. It's taking a minute. Okay, that should be coming to your inbox.
Any more background on this, Mike? It's been about
Yeah,
10
I
years.
I can provide some legislative background while we're looking at getting the presentation uploaded. And let me know, Adam, if that doesn't show up. Utah code requires that we, when we look at fee studies, we ensure that we have, create a nexus between the cost of service and the fee that's assessed. And there's specific legislation relative to business license studies and business license fees that also allow us to determine disproportionate fees, disproportionate impacts. In order to ensure that we're complying with the statute, we need to make sure that the ordinance that we adopt defines the disproportionate fee and the base fees associated with business licensing. Our process to do that, you can see a chart there actually on the screen there. In order to do that, we have three approaches that we look at in our methodology. So we look at our base service cost, our disproportionate service cost, and our enhanced service cost. Our base service cost includes all of the costs associated with direct personnel costs. So we look at salaries and benefits of the individuals involved in licensing and their department overhead costs, so specific to the department that employee is housed in. Then we also look at administrative overhead and allocate any administrative functions that serve all departments within the city, and that also is a part of that individual's costs. In addition to that base cost, then we also look at disproportionate costs, which are costs that may be disproportionate within business groupings that we're looking at. So in order to do that, what we evaluate typically for disproportionate costs is public safety costs. In this case, for Lindon City, we're looking at the police costs. Fire is handled outside of this equation. The disproportionate costs typically include that public safety cost, but we may look beyond that. There may be other disproportionate costs or enhanced service costs, which is the third bucket of that cost evaluation. Other enhanced services may include some areas, which actually I've never experienced this in a study, but may have business districts that have higher beautification levels of service or those types of things, and there could be a direct cost like that included in the study. Typically what we see for enhanced services may be like additional snow removal, I've had Draper City, we've looked at some enhanced service costs associated with snow plow up on the mountain there. But for most communities, we're looking at just the base cost and the disproportionate cost relative to public safety service. Just I can borrow. Okay, so that's the cost side of this analysis. The other pillar of our evaluation includes a process evaluation, which we rely a little more heavily on staff to evaluate that side of it. So essentially what that is, when we're looking at the process, is we, with staff, look at when a license comes in the door, who touches that license, every step of that process until it's completed. Staff helps us evaluate that and develop a process map for each application that we're evaluating. Obviously, that's an averaging, so not every fee is exactly that process, but we look at averaging those and creating a general process map for each application. Where there is a variation, that may warrant a separate application group. So you'll see in the schedule there's different business license applications in addition to the general new commercial or renewal application. So those are the two pillars that we look at in establishing the fee. Again, it's the cost evaluation and the process evaluation. Those come together to establish the fee itself. I spoke about this again with our cost evaluation. It's base department, the base employee cost, the department cost, and the administrative overhead cost. So here's an example of that process map that I discussed. This is the general commercial new license. Essentially what we're doing is establishing each step associated with that, the time spent, and the person involved. Often there can be multiple people involved, and I'll average costs there, but essentially this is that process map, and we do that for every application. In the report that's provided to you in the appendix, you can see all of the process maps for all of the business license applications that we evaluated. But this gives the example of that. Alrighty, so on this this chart, this is the outcome of that evaluation. So here we're looking at the base license cost for a new application and for renewal. So the first column here, here you can see the actual proposed or actual cost or that proposed license base fee. This is for a new application. So here, generally, this is the commercial category. Based on that evaluation of cost and process, we're showing a total cost of $176.25 compared to your current license, which is $40, which is the initial application. Then you have some different renewal fees there. But that same line here, the $176.25, that's, again, the new business application if you have a new business coming into the city. And then we've calculated the renewal for typically all of these, so it's a general renewal fee at $80.55. And that's the same for all of these different business types here. So the schedule shows, again, a different fee for new business applications for the different categories here, from commercial, alcohol, auction, short-term rental, SOBs, residential solicitation, a care facility, and a massage facility. So again, a different new application, but all of the renewals typically are the same. We don't see a different process for the renewal application. This is just that base service cost. So the actual cost to process the application associated with each of those business groupings. So that's that, when we're looking at the methodology, the first component here, the base cost. And in addition, there's disproportionate costs and enhanced service costs. So the next slide, this highlights our disproportionate analysis. So in addition to that base cost, any business, what we're trying to do is identify any business that has a disproportionate impact on the city. How we do that is we evaluate calls for service for police services, and we determine a cost per call based on your budget information for that specific service. Then we establish a baseline level of service for all businesses. In this case, what we've done is looked at all businesses and calculated an average call per business for all businesses within the city. Any business group that had a higher call ratio than that average, we flagged as disproportionate to be able to show that to you this evening. And as Mike indicated, our objective here is to provide you with that information, but often entities will evaluate those disproportionate fees and make policy decisions relative to either a cap on those fees or how we may want to set the schedule for these disproportionate fees. Once we have that average and look at the groups that are above that average, then we calculate the disproportionate fee, taking the difference between that average and the total calls for that group and multiply it by the cost per call that we've calculated in the first step. And that's how we've calculated our fees on this table. So this shows the business groupings that have disproportionate impacts. Again, this is in the report. Essentially what we're doing is, again, any business grouping that has a higher call ratio than the average for all businesses, then they're flagged here in this table. What I also want to point out here is typically, based on the statute, we need to be universal in how we apply our fees. So if we establish a business grouping, then what we need to make sure we do is we apply the same fee to every business in that grouping. We can't treat one business different than other businesses in that grouping unless we establish a separate grouping based on different criteria. So for example, I had a community I was working with that they had a specific late night coffee cafe destination that had a high call volume. Originally we had them grouped with other cafes within the community. They wanted to potentially pull that out as a separate grouping, so we created a late night cafe grouping. So unfortunately, that was the only business in that group, so it appeared as if it was isolating only one business, but essentially what that does is it says, okay, any late night cafe would be treated the same in that grouping. So once you establish the definition, you have to be universal in how you apply it. So our list includes, for disproportionate impacts, assisted living, big box retail, which is defined over 50,000 square feet, car washes, convenience stores, equipment leasing, fast food, group homes, the mobile home park, and the pawn shop. So the disproportionate impact per business is defined here. Essentially, that's showing the number of calls that exceed the average. So a lot of these have some pretty hefty call volumes, the big box at 237 and calls over that average. Some of these are only slightly above that average. So when you look at equipment leasing and fast food, they were less than a call above that average.
Quick question, how did you determine what the call average is, or what that business, where did you get that data from? Is
Yeah.
that Lindon City unique data?
Yes, it is the actual calls for service experienced in the prior, I'll have to go double check if it was fiscal year or calendar year, but we took a year's worth of actual data.
But just Lindon?
Yes,
Thank you.
and applied those to the specific businesses within the community.
And every business license that we have fits in one of these? I mean, that seems
No.
like a small category.
No, this is just the business groupings that had a disproportionate impact, but there are many business groupings that did not have a disproportionate impact, which are not included in this group here. So these are just those listings that had a disproportionate impact. I think in our report there's, if not, I can add that table, but there's a table that shows all of the full list of our disproportionate evaluation.
Is there on page
Yes.
11 and
Yeah,
12?
table 3.9. So, for example, I've got this report, I don't know if I'm using yours, but like auto body shops is a category, they did not have a disproportionate impact. Auto dealership, auto repair. So there's several categories that did not have a disproportionate impact. So I just isolated those that had disproportionate
And with the
impacts.
police calls, is it a call is one officer responding, or it could be one call could have 4 officers responding?
I think in this case, it is the call, and it may have multiple units sent to that call, so we did not evaluate intensity. It's just
One call.
Yeah,
Okay.
per business, so.
Thanks.
In addition, we often will look at an alternative demand unit. Typically, this is for assisted living and group homes that have multiple, they can be perceived to have multiple units within a single business. So for those areas, they also often have a high disproportionate impact due to the nature of the service that they provide. So in that instance, we'll look at the number of beds for that business grouping and calculate a fee per unit in that instance. So that can be somewhat scaled to size. If you have a small group home, they're not going to pay the average that maybe a larger group home is seeing. So in that instance, we have a calculated cost per unit rather than per business. So for assisted living, the disproportionate impact per business was calculated at $42,000. On a per bed basis, that's $670 per bed. There were 192 beds included in the survey, so that's the calculation on a per unit basis. We typically see this, that assisted living, big box retail, your convenience stores, and your fast food will have disproportionate impacts. Unique to your schedule is probably that mobile home park. Not all communities will have mobile home parks potentially and have a business license associated with that. Other communities that I've worked with, hotels and motels are often disproportionately impact communities. So there wasn't anything in this schedule that kind of stood out as unusual relative to the disproportionate evaluation. But as you can see, the fees per business are quite high. So for assisted living, again, $42,000 per business. Big box retail, $136,000 per business. Convenience stores at $18,000 and mobile home parks at almost $13,000 for that specific business. So essentially what this is showing is the maximum disproportionate impacts based on the methodology that we've employed. On the next slide, I wanted to, it's the next slide, but I'm going to jump to that real quick just to highlight additional things to think about relative to that those high fees there. So what this study does not do is it does not consider the other revenues that businesses generate, for example, sales tax revenues. Yeah. So often they contribute a large portion of your sales tax revenues, and this does not look at the net benefit of a specific business relative to their impacts. It does not also, doesn't consider their property tax generation. So businesses are taxed at 100% of their property valuation, whereas residential development is at 55% of that. So it does not really look at that revenues generated relative to their total cost. The reason why I highlight that is that's very challenging to evaluate the net impact of a specific business, because public safety is not their only cost or impact on the community either. The general fund houses many services and revenue streams, and a true net benefit or cost benefit analysis is not done as part of this study, but it's something to think about as you establish policy relative to business licensing. Also, what this study does not consider is unintended consequences as a result of changing fee structures, specifically related to public safety service. So as fees go up, there's been concern relative to these studies that there may be a failure to report criminal activity in order to reduce those calls for service to specific businesses. In addition, it may reduce economic activity, that if your business license fees are high, then that may influence where businesses are located. Again, this study doesn't evaluate that relationship or economic impact, but it's something to think about. So if we jump back to that slide now, again, this represents that maximum on a per business or per unit basis, but there are other considerations that you may want to evaluate as you look at establishing the fees for these categories. Again, this is the maximum. I have, in many instances, entities will adjust those fees downward potentially.
When I was with South Salt Lake, the convenience stores, there was one specific company that allowed you to still call in on the intercom and say you're coming in to pay. And they just had tons of gas thefts. And so that the city at that time, they decided to charge them $8,000 per business. That was justified under the study until they finally changed to prepay because they were responding there so many times for gas thefts.
So is it fair to say that this method, if city services were a fee for service, that these businesses, if they wanted, they get 4 free punches essentially for a police call, any above use, if they were paying per call on average, those big box stores would spend about $136,000 that year?
Yep.
Okay,
Correct.
thanks.
And that's a great point that Mike brought up, which is some entities will look at this as an education tool to say, okay, we're going to establish these fees in hopes that the pattern does change. Not that criminal activity doesn't get reported, but that maybe some of the local mechanisms change to influence the nature of calls or the frequency of calls. So it can also be viewed as that, as a way to change behavior potentially. So this again represents the maximum for that second part, which is the disproportionate element. We did not evaluate any enhanced services or anything like that, so we don't have that third cost bucket in this equation. So then the next step, what we look at is then evaluating the cost recovery or revenue analysis. So based on applying the proposed or cost, the calculated cost per unit for new commercial businesses and renewal businesses, multiplying that by the number of new applications and renewal applications, we calculated that would generate about $65,000 of cost recovery or revenue in this, based on those proposed fees. My understanding, based on information Mike provided, for fiscal year 23, you generated about $75,000 in total business license revenues, which included the disproportionate elements, so $75,000 in total. So with these revised fees, just for the base, the new application renewal, you're at about 65. And then, as you would imagine, if you were to assess the disproportionate fees, that's where there's quite a bit more cost recovery and therefore revenue generation. It's about $500,000 of cost recovery, bringing the total up to $550,000 plus in revenue or cost recovery. Again, that's primarily driven by big box, convenience stores, and the assisted living business groupings. So that gives you an idea of kind of the cost recovery that we're talking about relative to what you're currently generating in your with your business license fee structure now. We talked about these additional considerations for you to think about. So as Mike indicated, this is obviously not final and provides you with some information relative to the proposed or calculated fees. Based on your input, we can obviously modify those and reevaluate the cost recovery. And based on those recommendations, we would then complete the revenue analysis and the report, and then move to the adoption phase, which we would participate in and provide a similar presentation in that stage. But essentially, we wanted to get feedback, or also I can address questions relative to methodology, my experience with other communities, or anything like that. So open to questions.
So we haven't, our fee schedule right now is 10 years old. And
At least, yes.
okay.
We have not gone through this process since I've been the administrator for the last 12 years, and so it's been at least that long.
Okay. And do we already include in our license fees the disproportionate fees?
So the way we do our fees are a little weird. We charge $40 the first year. Let's say a bank, for example, we charge $40 the first year, then we charge $300 the next year. Typically, it's the other way around, where you're collecting your fees, higher fee the first year for processing a new application. So I'm not sure if that's a disproportionate fee or just cost to do business?
It could be historically that there was some disproportionate fee included in that second year, or some sort of, again, this is purely speculation, but that a new business was not charged that disproportionate fee in the first year of operation, but as they continued to renew, then that disproportionate was applied, so maybe they got a credit as being a new business. But what it looks like is, that's flipped, that usually the initial application fee, at least for the base fee, is higher. And then regardless of the year, the disproportionate fee is charged. So the first year of operation, whatever disproportionate fee is there is applied, and then a reduction is experienced in the second year for the renewal process, but the disproportionate fee is still there. So the business is paying that disproportionate fee every year until the fee is recalculated. So entities are updating these a little more frequently to modify those disproportionate fees.
Are there times that businesses challenge these
Yes.
disproportionate fees, and
Yes,
how do you handle that?
So I had a similar example where we had a fee structure put forward in the public hearing process. A legal representation from the convenience stores came forward and said, hey, this is too high, we're gonna challenge this. We provided data and went back and forth and showed them where that was coming from. And ultimately, the council opted to reduce fees generally, to say, okay, we're not gonna charge this high in any of these instances. And that kind of removed that concern from that specific business grouping. But I haven't seen it actually go to actual litigation or to a court case or anything like that.
Yeah, we have these assisted living or full-time care Alzheimer's unit. Naturally, they're going to have a lot of, it's an end-of-life stage place to
Yes.
live. I just would imagine they're gonna completely, seeing a fee like that. So how are other communities handling this, I guess, looking at that?
I did provide you a comparison with
Yeah.
a lot of other communities. Orem City, they're the only ones in Utah County that I could find that has the same proposed fee structure. And so I don't remember if they had a per bed fee.
Yeah, I would have to check.
Lodging.
They have it at $485, but I wasn't sure if that's per
I mean, but
business
that's
or
a
per
really
bed.
significant impact to their,
Yeah.
their P&L number, what their operating assumptions are, so.
Yeah, and that's the kind of feedback we're looking at add up for this, the disproportionate amount is, what should those fees be? Like Orem, for example, I didn't read their study for how much they could charge a big box. I imagine it's probably similar to ours,
Yes.
but they decided to charge $3,500. And so, those are things we'll have to look at.
I just completed a study with Sandy, and they took the approach of a cap and saying, okay, we're comfortable at most assessing $6,000 for a fee. And so they looked at all the business groupings and said, okay, we're going to, any business grouping that exceeded our cap, we're gonna reevaluate that. And even, that then spilled down to some of these other businesses, because they didn't wanna be perceived as kind of playing favorites with regards to business groupings. And so they provided some modifications for smaller groups. So that's one way that entities will look at it, is saying we're not gonna allow it to exceed a certain amount. Others will look at the revenue side or the cost recovery side and say, well, we're comfortable with inflation generating a certain amount of new revenue to cover our cost. And then I kind of back into those fees based on that recovery, of saying, okay, well, all fees then come down to this amount on the disproportionate side to achieve that cost recovery target.
I think currently our fee structure, Marcy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like we're charging $250 per room right now. I think
I
is that
don't know
right?
if it's per room, I think it's,
Oh,
that's
just per
their fee.
business.
Just per business.
Wow,
Okay.
some change.
And then other entities will think about the public benefit. Again, this is difficult to quantify, but in some instances, I've seen disproportionate fees for like hospitals or medical related industries. And some entities will say, we're just not gonna charge for that because it's, we understand the nature of that business and it's always going to have calls for service But because that's somewhat perceived as an essential service for a community, they eliminate or dramatically reduce the fees associated with that specific business grouping. It's always challenging whenever you start making those types of policy decisions, because now it creates winners and losers in that discussion. And so it's hard for me to kind of steer that ship, but we can evaluate the outcomes of any sort of decision like that to say, okay, if we remove fees or we cap them, what does that do to the cost recovery side of the equation? You know, obviously any change downward is going to mean less cost recovery than what we're showing here.
And you can set the fees at whatever you deem appropriate to the whole grouping.
Yes,
Right.
again, we have to be uniform in how we apply it to the
So
grouping.
that brought to my mind the home occupation fee. I know we had the state legislation a couple of years back that changed. We no longer charge a home business license fee if their additional offsite impact is no different than what they're doing residentially. So if they don't employ people, if they don't have customers coming and going, they're exempt. So anyone who's getting worried now about the home
Oh,
occupation, I
yes.
got my little business at home, that they have an exemption opportunity.
Yes, I
by
think we
state
have
statute.
about 38 businesses that either request licensing
license.
or have meet the qualification there of having
Okay.
some offsite items.
And most of them want a license, so I think there's over 200.
We have close to 300 home-based.
Home-based businesses
Do not.
do not, that are
They don't have
exempt.
a fee, but Marcy, they still want a license.
Oh,
And so, you know, for liability reasons or some other reason, and so, you know, Marcy's still processing a license and taking time doing those. I did see where there's some cities that will charge just a application
Yes, some
printing fee or something. you
some
know.
businesses actually for those types that request will charge the full renewal fee. And if they're going through the same process that everybody else is, and they are assessed the fee, other entities like Lindon are a little more lenient with regards to how you treat home-based business. But the analysis only assumes about 38 for the cost recovery.
And you're saying we don't currently charge?
There's almost 300 that we don't charge.
$25 fee on your, 25 for home occupation and 40 on your spreadsheet. The big spreadsheet you gave us.
Yeah, I
My
think
re-
that's the
If
first.
if a home business has an impact, they pay a $25 application fee. If they don't have any impact, there is no charge for
Okay.
the application.
But that also speaks to that kind of flop of the first year it's a little cheaper, and then
Yeah,
the second year
which-
it's more expensive.
And we've taken the approach, they have an impact if they have customers coming to the home. And so that's what,
Or
That's the
employees.
indicator.
we've mostly kept it to customers.
Customers, not
Like
employees.
preschools or things that you would have. people
Massage
come in.
therapy, we have 4 or 5 home massage therapist businesses.
And just confirming the assisted living, that 250 is not per room as stated, it's per facility. And I imagine the storage units, the 100 per unit is probably
We only charge a business
$100 for the full facility, okay?
Mike, you had talked about convenience stores that sold fuel, that they had the push button to call in. What other types of, if you will, educational, informational programs or processes have you seen set up that can help a business that has a large disproportionate fee that could be used to help them operate more efficiently as a business? Do we have any data or information on things cities have done in that regard?
I only have that one experience with convenience stores, but
Yeah, and I've seen some, like big box retailers or those that have a disproportionate impact will look at on-site security measures, whether that's increased lighting to reduce criminal activity. That can help, at least in some cases. Anecdotally, while it doesn't relate to this, I think businesses are, big box retailers, for example, are employing on-site security measures to reduce theft, for example, which would correlate to a reduction in calls for service. So essentially, one of those elements is looking to on-site, a way to shift the burden from the city to on-site to reduce the calls for service. So it's not failing to call, but it's how do we reduce those calls for service by on-site security measures.
So a question I would have with that is if they have their own security and they catch somebody, do they not still call the police to, I mean,
It could, but-
that big box can't prosecute them themselves.
Yes, I mean, so, there may be, this gets into the realm of understanding or studying on-site security, but there may be instances where, yes, that would happen, but, that type of measure may just on its face reduce criminal activity because now you have a presence there. So we're not evaluating the efficacy of those types of measures, but that's what I've seen, that's the discussion relative to shifting some of that burden to the local business.
I can think of a recent example talking with Chief. We have some large retailers who allow self-checkout, and it's just gotten a little bit
Yes.
out of control, the self-checkout theft. And so one of them has closed self-checkout now, so they can kind of monitor the product going out the door a little bit better, so.
And Mayor, they're also, they don't charge every single person that they stop. They decide whether they'll just trespass them and not have them come back, or if they'll call the police. So they are taking those steps to try and reduce the number of calls that are coming in, and they have associates, when they see theft starting to go, they intervene and try to direct the person away from continuing the theft activity. So the chief has done a really good job with a couple of these big box that are demanding so many calls to try and reduce those number of calls.
So then do we have to have, we have big box A and big box B. Big box B is taking measures to help reduce theft. We now have to have different groupings then?
Well, again, in order to establish a business grouping, we have to have a definition of what will distinguish those business groupings. So some will use geographic locations. That's allowed to say, okay, if we have service areas, and that may result in different call averages. Some will actually remove the outlier. So if you have, in this instance, it's very challenging where you have two big box retailers. If one starts to make improvements but one doesn't, do you penalize one or create a freeloader in the system? When there's larger numbers of businesses in the business grouping, then cities are a little more comfortable to remove that outlier and say, okay, we're not going to punish all of them for that specific user. But again, what it can allow is dialogue, right? To say, okay, we want to try to reduce this fee, but we need some help to figure out how to reduce call volumes. So ultimately, it becomes a policy decision if we can't find a way to separate those businesses into individual groups.
It seems like we're walking a fine line where you want the businesses here. You don't want to create a fee that's so exorbitant that they'll say, well, we're going to leave Lindon or not come into Lindon because they bring so many benefits of the amenities and services for the residents as well as sales tax revenue. It's kind of like this pendulum of where's the right place to be.
I had a question about a method question. With the flow, the process flow aspect, with looking at the tables, you had which employee for which amount of time, and I'm assuming you know how much they get paid and their benefits, and so it's like, okay, that 15 minutes cost this much, and summed them perhaps for each process?
Yes, so in each application, yes, we take the individual's time and multiply it by their cost per minute.
Okay.
Or cost per hour, so that we can say, okay, if you spend 15 minutes, this is how much it costs for 15 minutes of that person's time.
Okay.
And the whole process.
And so then our tables 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, so those four tables, are those numbers also folded in somehow into the overall, or are these just more for information?
No, those are the tables that feed into the cost per minute calculation.
Okay.
So our salaries and benefits is one component of the cost per minute. Then the department overhead is added to that cost per minute. And then the administrative overhead is the third bucket that is added to the overall cost per employee. Once we take all of those variables and add them together, that's the cost per minute found in table 3.7.
Okay.
So you can see on table 3.7, salaries and benefits per minute, department overhead cost per minute, and indirect or administrative overhead cost per minute to get the total cost per minute for those specific functions within the city.
And so like with Mike's position, he's a line item in those tables, but I didn't see him in any of the flow.
Yeah, I only have myself in there for alcohol licenses and
Okay.
if we ever get a sexually oriented
Okay.
business. Those
Sure,
are the only
yeah,
two
yeah,
I
yeah.
have myself in.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, and some of them, like the city recorder is listed there, but we ultimately decided to pull that out of the
Yeah.
process map because it's counted in the administrative overhead
Okay.
cost, so we didn't want to double count it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we pulled it, we keep it in the process map to show the steps that it
Mhm.
goes through, but I zeroed out the cost for that specific employee.
And one item you may see is recreation superintendent. Why are they there?
Yeah, I was like, what do they have to do with
Well,
businesses?
we
Yeah.
get a lot of solicitors and they need to have their badge printed, and that's where the badge is printed at in the rec department.
Makes sense.
Facility, you know, it's like,
Adam, could you scroll up to 10 on yours?
Mike, you've got the
Oh,
mouse
Mike,
there.
up to, right there. So and I think you may have said this number, 556,000 is what we can recover cost-wise. What is it currently? Did you give us that number?
75,000.
75,000. So it's an additional 475 in fees to our business community. And my understanding, this is what's being proposed, is these numbers right here? High level, this is what the data is showing, and we like to make data-driven decisions. This is what it would be.
This would be similar to our impact fee studies where we might have, hey, this is what you can justify, but
Yeah,
in reality, we know the city council is gonna pick a lower number.
sure,
So this is what you could justify, not what we're proposing.
gotcha.
So like when I was with South Salt Lake, they reviewed all these and then they said, we want to remain revenue neutral our first year. And then they evaluated it every year with the budget. And so they had staff come back, figure out what the fee, what do the fees need to be revenue neutral next year. And so that's what we presented.
So for tonight's, this is a discussion item only. This is not an action item. And so we're really looking for some feedback, some thoughts on where should those fees be for you to feel comfortable with that and the impact to the business community. And then we would come back in a future public hearing to adopt those fees.
I think those big box numbers are far too high for me. It's hard. It is picking winners and losers, which I hate when we do that. But I don't know.
So another thing to think about is also, in addition to this, you also have the flexibility to combine groups and say, okay, we're gonna, maybe we don't have as many business groupings, or you can eliminate business groupings. In this case, it's difficult to combine, because sometimes there's like fast food and restaurants have a disproportion. They just say, we're gonna put those in one category. You could take your assisted living and your group home and say, we're gonna put those in one category and establish a fee per bed for assisted living and group homes at some lower level. Again, you don't have to charge a disproportionate fee, so some you may say, we're not going to assess that fee. Most communities, again, what I see just as a standard, I guess, they'll look at those high fees and say, what's the max we're comfortable going to, and then evaluate the revenue from that perspective. Anything below $500, I've seen a comfort level for a community to say, okay, we're gonna contemplate assessing a fee like that for disproportionate impacts. A $500 fee per business, in some cases is perceived as achievable. Again, when you start getting above the $1,000 range and into the multiple thousands of dollars, that's when I see entities start to evaluate what the comfort level is for that maximum allowable fee.
I guess one question, I don't think you'll, because you noted your limitations, so I'll maybe ask Mike. as far as pinch points for the city, like with the police calls, do we have any sense of number of calls that were not able to be responded to because they were on a call that's being consumed by these high flyers? Is there any sense of that? Like opportunity missed. It's like, oh, we have to delay because we're at this store again. Or another way of saying it is are the police capable currently at their capacity to meet all the call needs coming in? Maybe the chief could.
So we'll prioritize, if we have an urgent, a crash, medical issue, we'll prioritize before we head to those calls. But call volume, we're able to respond to each call. It may take us a little bit longer to get there depending on priority, but we have adequate resources to respond and handle most of these calls. I just wanted to add a couple things here when you're talking about big boxes. From our perspective, you have, these big boxes have loss prevention officers. We've noticed recently one loss prevention officer had left one of the big boxes, call volume goes down. But that also means they're losing a lot of inventory out the door, and it becomes known that you can go there to take things. So those call volumes vary depending on if there's a loss prevention officer in-house at the big boxes to call us when they're seeing people leave the check registers and pass there. So there's a little bit more info there.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mike, you said they did this at South Salt Lake? What kind of pushback did they get there on this kind of?
The only pushback I remember getting is just from the convenience stores. That was the only one I really remember.
Going back to how you were saying, a lot of communities, the initial application to open the business is a little bulkier fee, but we have it switched where it's been like this $40 flat rate for everything. And then they get the little bit higher fee based on their size and scope. Would it be prudent to flip that back?
Yes, and our schedule does show that where the initial fee for a commercial is calculated at $176, but the renewal is at $80. So it's flipped.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? It's usually more time consuming.
More work and effort. I'm just wondering what the thought was behind that in the day. Maybe they thought, oh, we want to make starting a business not as cumbersome, or starting a business is a risk, and a lot of businesses don't make it. I don't know what the thought process was to flip
I
that.
looked through and I couldn't see anything.
Like, hey, located in Lindon, we're gonna give you a chance. We wanna be an incubator for new businesses. Come try it out. And if it doesn't work, at least your upfront costs were lower.
It could
I don't
be.
hate that idea, you know what I mean? It
But
goes,
are we past that point now where we probably need to recover staff time and probably involved?
It seems like
And-
one of the pinch points might be if these numbers are flipped, if we have the 556,000 and subtract the 75,000 we are collecting, so there's a difference of like $480,000. And so that's like a pinch point. Is the city able to absorb that financial bite, and for how long?
we already are.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention, is keep in mind, you're already subsidizing these businesses.
And
And
we are
so-
able to do so. It's like, have we
we
not
have
been
been,
able to do
so-
something as a result?
Yes, really, I think this is a decision for you, is how much do you want to try to recoup? And what is politically,
So what is the
viable.
impact on our budget? I mean, you say that we're able to cover it, but is it drawing
Well,
down on?
I would argue that the impact is this 556,000.
In additional
so-
revenue.
480, because we are
The
getting
revenue that we're
something.
receiving for licensing of our businesses is only about 75,000 a year.
Yeah, so
And so,
Minus
Yeah.
that.
so it's that difference between that 556 that's justifiable of, hey, this is the true impact that these businesses are having to us financially.
Yeah, another way to think about it is the general fund does not allocate cost and revenue based on, like an enterprise fund. For example, if you use a certain amount of gallons of water, you pay per unit
Right.
of use. Well, sales tax revenues and property tax revenues are not tied to a per unit of use within the general fund. This is shifting that of saying, okay, instead of using property tax and sales tax revenues, we're now allocating cost based on a methodology, based on use in the system. That cost is already covered in the general fund. It shifts the burden to this fee structure and essentially frees up other revenues within the general fund, because now you have a new revenue source that's coming in into this equation. I'd also point out, relative to the history and business retention, as a reminder, this is an annual fee. So we're talking about, $176 annually for a new application versus $40 annually. So it's $130 difference there, but again, that's on an annual basis relative to a business. So typically we don't see really a lot of pushback relative to the cost recovery of the process map, the specific time of personnel involved. It's the disproportionate side where you see the biggest revenue and cost recovery and the biggest pushback or discussion, because in this equation, that's the majority of the cost recovery that's happening. Public safety is expensive, but a high level of service that you want to maintain. So that's where the majority of the cost recovery is.
And I think also just keep in mind that, towards our discussion at the beginning, that there is a $98, remember what, $98.25 or something like that, fire fee that is added onto that $80, would be added onto that $80 for the renewal each year.
Including on the home occupations?
There's only certain home occupations like
I think we only have
daycares.
6 that
Okay.
require fire.
Well, it's interesting, it would be curious what these fees would look like if we had just done a CPI, inflationary step over the past 12 years we're talking, maybe
Or
more.
probably 20
mean-
years. I mean, to be,
Probably 20s. I've seen, fee schedules that go back 20 years that are identical.
They're the same fees for almost 20 years. We haven't had even an inflationary change. That's interesting.
I think it's philosophically, is it competition with our other cities, right? So businesses have the decision to open in Lindon or in Provo. That's why I love that spreadsheet that Mike put together. And I'm surprised how low some other cities are. I mean, American Fork's $60 straight across the board for almost everything. Saratoga, and so I want to. Philosophically, are we a business-friendly city? Because I do think that comes up. Hey, what are your fees? Combined with property taxes as well. It's a big discussion as businesses open up places. And so I don't want to be too far off of what our sister cities are, 1 to 2 cities north and south of here, because I do think that comes... because I do think we're a business-friendly city. We recognize that we're a city that is more dependent on sales tax revenue than maybe other cities. It's a blessing, and maybe someday a curse, but a blessing. And so I find myself wanting to be closer to some of these cities rather than maybe the suggestion and continue to offset or subsidize, as Adam calls it, which I think is an accurate description of what's going on here.
I almost wonder too if this is just not a concept that other cities have ventured into yet, just to get the data and understand where they're at. And is that something that will start to happen? You've mentioned a few communities that are diving in.
It's not as common of a fee study, so I do impact fee studies and feasibility studies, economic development. What's happening right now, the trend is I'm seeing more fee studies related to planning, engineering, and building services. And that's a product of the auditor's office coming out with a finding that said local governments, it appears there's a discrepancy in the fee schedule and the service that's being provided. So you need to have a nexus between your fee schedule and some sort of study. But again, that's on more the building, planning, and engineering side. But I could see this is in the same vein, which is a fee for service, and the auditor's office wants to see how did you calculate that fee that you're charging new development, or not new development, new businesses within your community. So I am seeing a few more of these pop up as a result of that focus on the nexus between fee and cost.
Mike, can you go back to the slide that shows the lower rate? That was it said proposed fee. So this one on the actual cost or the proposed license renewal or proposed base fee, I'm just curious if maybe we start on this end. This would cover 90 or 95% of our businesses. Is that a fair statement? So maybe we start here and say on this lower end of these renewal fees for the majority of our businesses are these numbers that you're comfortable with. Is that sound reasonable? And then let's get to these higher, I think everybody's scared of these higher numbers, but that's really only 8 or 9 categories of businesses. This is the majority of our 800-ish businesses are gonna be in these fee categories, and so.
Yeah, this covers the majority of your internal process related to processing business licensing. So the direct cost associated with that is this schedule. And really this covers all businesses because it's either a business is a new application or a renewal. And this is the schedule that would address that. Going back to this category, we have 7, 10, 13, 25, 30 businesses in this disproportionate. So out of the 800,
That's a
30
really good
businesses
point, yeah.
fall within this disproportionate impact. But you can see their disproportionate impact is large, but it's just a small number of your existing businesses that fell within this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point by Adam, that just to kind of put this,
And I think we have about 500 commercial licenses. That's, the 800 is counting the home occupations that pay the impact and the ones that are just wanting a license.
Oh, that's right, because we have about 600 that are.
Yeah.
well, council, how much feedback then are you looking for us to give you right now? I guess you want to come back and actually with something proposed. So how would you like the feedback here? Is anyone feeling comfortable to look at that first level fee and talk about it? And maybe do we need to digest and think about the disproportionate fee structure, and what would be the best way to?
If somebody's coming in, or somebody is an existing business, on this chart, it would just be the $80.55 plus whatever the fire charges. This would only be for new businesses coming in would be that higher rate.
No, sorry, the first part of that was accurate. A renewal would come in and pay $80. If they are in one of these categories, if I were a car wash and I was coming in for a renewal, I'd pay the $80 plus whatever disproportionate fee was established, if you kept a fee there. So
Well, go back to that chart we were on.
So
That chart doesn't represent, or does it represent disproportionate?
It does not.
That's my
Yeah.
point.
Time. That's just the staff time to process.
Just the base services, if you will. An
Yes.
existing business would only be the 80.55, is that correct?
Correct.
But a new business coming in for alcohol would pay the 224.
Yes.
Keeping the disproportionate as a separate discussion.
Yes. That aside, that's accurate. Yep.
And we're able to charge alcohol more because we're putting more time in,
Yes.
not because we're discriminating against alcoholic.
Yeah, because we have to check that they're not within a certain parameter or feet of a community
Schools.
facility. And so we've got to check all those. Takes us a little bit longer. We've got to sign a local consent form. They've got to take that to the state. There's a lot more involved with it.
Background checks.
Background checks, corporation checks. Yep.
I'm curious, Marcia, you deal with these people every day. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, as you've seen some of this.
I don't know. I think that some of them just seem a little out of balance in some ways. If you have a big box store who's actually paying less than a little restaurant, that it sometimes seems a little burdensome on a little restaurant and not so much on a big box store. But I think most people, new companies, a lot of people this is no big deal. They're just writing a check. It's part of their corporate fees. They just do that. And a lot of people, this is a brand new thing, and they're saying, this is a lot for us. You know, we weren't sure that this was the amount we can do. Is there anything we can do to do that, to work through that? And most people are somewhere in between. That they have to work these fees into their costs, and they're prepared that this is part of what they pay to, for the services that they need. And so I think it just overall needs to be looked at just to make sure that we are addressing each of the type of businesses and the fees that they are being charged.
Thanks.
And that statement that Marcy, that first statement she said, that's kind of what led to this, is because we were looking at our fee schedule, and Walmart, for example, pays $100, but Smoking Apple pays $190.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of kicked this off, and
Doesn't make sense.
the reason for looking at the business license fees. So if looking at that table there is kind of our costs, just kind of a feedback are you comfortable with that? And I've been doing this for 18 years, and I have businesses that they'll complain about fees, but I've never had a business not come to a city because my fee was $300, or something. That's like Marcy said, they put that into their yearly fee amount, or.
We talked a little bit about neighboring cities and trying to stay close, but if they haven't done any study and they haven't updated theirs either, then I worry that all we're gonna do is just keep with the status quo mostly. So I think it's important that we consider that, and I think we ought to recoup some of this, but being fair to all, but I worry about focusing too much on keeping with our neighbors.
I think because Orem did a study 6 years ago, I think they're a good, comparison to look at. We can also I didn't look at any in Salt Lake County, but if you look at like Saratoga Springs, for example, they charge $25 per employee up to a $500 max. So, you could be $550 for a business there, depending on the number of employees that you have.
My initial reaction was that they were too high for me, just my gut check. When I saw it, I was just like, I've got a number of family and friends that have businesses, in Lindon, and I think that was my just initial reaction.
To this
To
chart,
just that chart, so
not the
seeing,
disproportionate,
no, just,
that.
the disproportionate was like a,
But do they fall under the exemption, the state exemption?
some would, but some would be heavy industrial, and others, brick and mortar stores, and so I just thought about that, I was like, it's a little high for me. And I also think it's tricky for me because of the point of who's subsidizing who. Some of these businesses might be giving us much more than the few $100s that we're going to be asking them to give us. And so I don't know who's so that's why I just look in that first table of just the fee. My initial reaction is it's a little high.
Well, so maybe what could be beneficial is, in an effort to provide some tools for you as a council to review, I could look at, again, what other entities do is using the comps to then look at some scenarios. So if I were to take Orem as a comparable that has done a recent study, if we establish fees in a similar range for some of these business groupings and then recalculate the revenue analysis based on that, or the cost recovery analysis. So going back to this slide here, obviously this is the cost recovery based on the maximum allowable, but what happens if this was capped at the 3,500 that we see at Orem, and the convenience store was capped at 1,000, and some of these others were capped there? What would the cost recovery look like relative to what you're currently generating at the 75,000?
Yeah.
So that may provide some bookends at least to say, okay, if we peg it to that, and then it also provides some insight to, again, if this hasn't been updated in 20 years, if we peg it to that, is that sufficient from your perspective? And you may say, no, we're comfortable going a little bit higher than that cap using Orem as a comp, and we're gonna do somewhere in between here.
You said Orem's is 6 years old.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it at least gives, again, some bookends to say, what's the magnitude of change if we cap it relative to the most recent comparable? And I can update this table and give you some perspective for that.
That'd be great. I think also it's probably just shock too. Having a 400% increase on a fee is harder to swallow, even if it's like, oh, it's $100. You're like, oh, you know, or $200. You're like, that's a 300% increase.
Mike, do we have a chart that's showing what people are paying now on a renewal?
Yeah, that's part of his spreadsheet. But I like what Cole said originally, like, why are we charging? Why are we increasing? Are we struggling? And I think I struggle sometimes when the government's like, well, the data says we can charge more. Let's charge them more. Let's charge them. We can charge them 500,000. And I think that, I hope that's not the reason we decide to increase fees, is because we can. I think I struggle sometimes when it's like, I agree with Marcy. Like, that makes no sense for a Smoking Apple to pay more than Walmart. And so I think let's fix those discrepancies. Let's not just charge our businesses more because we can, in my opinion.
Are you good with us bringing back some potential numbers for you to look at in a few weeks and further our discussion at that point?
Yeah.
For sure.
You know, kind of to your comment, Marcy, on how people come in. As a business owner, when you go to do this, these are costs that don't help you make money as a business. They just don't. They just don't. And so the first time you come in and you're, oh my gosh, why? And now it's put into your head, and the next time you come in and you know it's there. You're not happy about it, but you're not moaning about it because you heard the whole thing and you do write the check. But inside you're,
Thanks.
Information, thank you so much.
Information, appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
All right, item number 9 will be, this is a budget and fee schedule update. We're considering a resolution. Do some updates here. We'll invite Kristen,
You have public
Aaron.
hearing opened?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
second.
Motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick to open a public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so first we're going to start off with the budget amendment. And there's a few things to amend, even though we just had an amendment a month ago. And we're going to have another amendment next month because as soon as I turn this in, I got more things. So they're noted. And then the page 48 has a summary of everything that's changing. We've got a lot of increases in expenses and change in fund balance usage, so of 1.5 million. We had increase in revenues of 1.2 million, decrease in, expenses, increase in expenses of 1.2 million, and decrease in revenue of 284,000. Are there, and so this came with notes as well, and so are there any questions?
Thank you as always for those notes. I can understand that a whole lot better than some of those other sheets.
Yeah.
And for those that might be listening online, this is typical. We create a budget. We have to allocate specific dollars within that budget for services and needs and expenses and revenues coming in. And sometimes as the year goes by,
Life
things
happens.
happen a little differently. Maybe we can't expend the funds for something. We have to carry it over forward or something.
Maybe we have
yeah.
a series of water breaks.
Yeah, we have to write some checks to repair some pipes we weren't
Yep.
planning.
Is that what number 12 is? Is that associated with those water breaks, or have we seen those costs come through yet?
So this is not part of the water breaks. This is, as one, our Public Works Director is doing road overlays and construction. They're recognizing that there's pipes in under the roads that need to be fixed. So most of it's water. There's a few sewer and storm that need to be repaired because they don't want to like fix the road and then have to go in and dig
tear it
up
up.
the road to fix those. So that's what those are. So that's not the water breaks. The water breaks have been able to be absorbed in the budget so far. We're still seeing them come in, so that might be included in our budget amendment next month.
All right, council, any questions on this proposed budget amendment? Any public comment? This is a public hearing.
Seeing none, I'll motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now back to you, council. Any further discussion on these amendments?
If there's not any, I'm ready to make a motion. I'd move to approve Resolution 2024-7-R as presented.
By Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
So after the
to go.
budget amendment, and before the tentative budget starts, we put in this estimated change order for paving of $352,000. That is not included in this budget amendment, and that's the one I was referring to that I received right after I turned this in, and it will be included next month, but we just wanted to give you a heads up that we did just receive that.
I was trying to see where that fit into the.
Yeah, it didn't.
So those streets that you asked the question about, number 12, were sort of, we got the utility lines in there, but some of these are repaving those additional roadways that were not originally contemplated on some of this. And then adding some other areas. So on this map, it's just off the map. There's this section of 200 south from 800 west to Geneva. Really poor condition on the asphalt there. There's a little additional added on Main Street, and then this cul-de-sac off of Canal Drive here, so.
We'll look forward to those next month.
Yes.
All right, very good. We'll move on now. Keep you in
All
your
right.
chair.
Yep.
Item number 10. This is also a public hearing on a tentative budget adoption.
Make a motion to open a public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Broderick, seconded by Councilmember Hoyt to open a public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're in a public hearing. Take it away.
All right, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. This is our first draft of it's our tentative budget. And so this is really just giving us a starting point after plugging in budget requests to meet with the department heads and fine tune it. So this is just kind of a kicking off point for our discussions. And so we're going to be meeting with department heads next week. When I say we, it's going to be Adam, our city administrator, and Chase Adams, our assistant finance director, and I will be meeting with each department head separately to go over their department budgets and fine-tune things and look at how it impacts fund balances in all of the funds. The water, sewer, storm, recreation funds are enterprise funds and are supposed to be run like a business, and so we look at those separately versus our governmental funds, which the general fund is the largest, and those are usually run off of taxes or special revenues. So if in our discussions, excuse me, with the Public Works Director, especially concerning those enterprise funds, we've had an initial proposal of increasing water rates 3%, sewer rates 7%, and stormwater rates 2%. And as we fine tune this, we may evaluate if those are adequate or not. And so we'll just keep you guys posted. We do have a work session to go into great detail, have lots of questions and answers for you guys, and get direction from you. That will be on April 15th. And if you have any questions about anything, please reach out to me or to Adam, whoever, and, because we would definitely like to have those questions answered and have you have as much information as possible prior to the next meeting on April 15th. So not your next meeting, but my next meeting.
Wonderful. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, just as Kristen mentioned, if there's anything, if you can be reviewing this before that next meeting, give us a call, talk to us, let us hash out anything before we get too much further in the budget process so that we can make amendments and bring that to you on the 15th and make sure that it fits within all of these department requests. And so that date, April 15th, that's really the date that any significant changes or projects or ideas that you have as a council or as individual members that, hey, I would really like to see X, Y, and Z done, that would be the time to bring that up with the council. Talk to us ahead of time, see what we can do to fit it in the budget. And then as we get later in, we're looking at having our final budget adopted in June. And so those last few weeks of April and then May, if we're making really substantial changes, that becomes very difficult for us to plug that all in and make it work, so.
All right, this is a public hearing. Any comment from those in attendance here regarding this agenda item? All right, council, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second it.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Broderick, seconded by Councilmember Jacobs to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, council, back to you then. Any further questions on what's before you here?
No, appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I think mine and Van's first year as council members is what warrants this warning. You must have everything April 15th. Do your best. I think we came on a June, like the day we were adopting it, and Kristen has PTSD from it. So. But Kristen and Adam both are always so great to sit down with. I enjoy sitting down with them, going over the budget. So if you have those questions or concerns and sometimes, I mean, this type of budgeting is so much different than the budgeting that I had always seen all my life. Fund balances, it's different. So, yeah, with that said, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-8-R as presented.
A second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Stewart. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you for your good work on this.
Just really quick before you go to that next RDA item, just for the record and for those that maybe watch this or are online. So we have a public meeting here to discuss the budget again on April 15th. And then we'll review a public hearing to adopt the proposed budget May 6th, and then the final budget proposal on June 3rd. So there's still 3 more public meetings for people to participate in if they choose to do that.
Okay,
So
very good. Great information. All right, we're on item number 11. This is a recess to our Lindon City Redevelopment Agency, RDA. And so I entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll move to recess the Lindon City Council meeting and convene as the Lindon City RDA.
All right. Motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, first order of business then for our roll call is state your name and an aye.
Jake Hoyt, aye.
Lincoln Jacobs, aye.
Cole Hooley, aye.
Carolyn Lundberg, aye.
Stewart, aye.
Broderick, aye.
Okay, and before you should be the minutes from our last RDA meeting from February 5th, 2024. Any comments on that review? Right. If it's all in order?
I'll make a motion to approve the RDA minutes from February 5th, 2024 as presented.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Sounds like that was unanimous. Any opposed? Okay, fantastic. All right, now we'll go ahead and go to the budget item on item number 3 of the RDA agenda. And it is a public hearing again, so thank you.
Second.
Okay, So moved by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick. All in favor to open a public hearing?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the RDA budget it's within the city's budget, but we're meeting to adopt it separately as well. And there's 4 districts that have funds in this, in the RDA. And
Kristen,
Uh-huh.
if we could back up, since we
Oh,
do have
sure.
new council members, could you just give us like a 2-line definition of what an RDA is and why we have this?
So
for
RDA,
those-
Redevelopment Agency, and there's actually different types of districts where we can establish a district, and it's basically like taking part of the property taxes generated in that area and using them to improve the area to bring in more taxes. And so as the area is improving and the property taxes increase, an increment of the property tax is coming into the RDA. So there's different taxing entities for property taxes, and, you know, the state, the county, the city, the school district is the biggest part. And so some of the older districts, the school district was part of that tax increment. And the older districts no longer are active collecting the tax increment. We currently have 2 districts activated, and in the 24 fiscal year that we're currently in, we're only getting tax increment on 1, which is the 700 North CDA.
So an example is State Street. You know, UDOT improved State Street. We had funds there. We've used them
Yeah.
even for this city center. Adam could speak to this even more concisely than I can, but, you know, you can take that fund, that little bucket of funds that's been set aside for improvements, like parking lots or
Yep.
whatnot. So-
Yeah, so the State Street, West Side, and District 3 have funds still there, but are no longer collecting. And so there's 3 that have expired as far as collecting tax increment. We have 1 that is collecting, and then we have a 5th one that has been activated and will collect it in the 2025 fiscal. Sorry. So the county does this on a calendar year. And
It's in our fiscal,
so,
okay.
yeah, so it's going to be,
Halfway.
it's going to be in November of 24, which is our 25 fiscal year. So, sorry.
Sorry, hopefully that just gives our new council members a little background. Thank you for
Yeah.
helping us with that little digression. I'll let you
Yeah.
move forward then on the item here, what's before us.
Yep. And so,
Sorry, I lost it. There we go.
okay, and I didn't print the page that has just the RDA on it, but it's part of the tentative budget that was reviewed, and it's those 5 districts that I just mentioned.
All right, council, any questions then for Kristen as you look that over? This also has the same, it looks like dates proposed for further
So I was talking
review
about
and
the tentative
adoption.
budget, but sorry, I was talking about the tentative budget, but we're also doing a budget amendment. I'm sorry, we're doing the budget amendment right now. And so that is, that's
highlighted
just
items.
cleaning up the numbers for the property purchase that was done from the 700 North CDA. We had budgeted tentative numbers, and now that it's happened, I'm just saying, okay,
This is where it
Yeah.
really landed.
yeah.
Yeah.
You guys pretty comfortable with it?
Close the public hearing.
Yes, please.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Broderick, seconded by Councilmember Hoyt. I saw Jacob's elbows. Okay, all in favor to close, oh, hang on. We didn't ask the public to comment yet, so hang on. Do we have any comment on the RDA amendment and resolution? Okay, we'll take those.
So moved.
Okay, those moves.
So seconded.
Okay, all right. All in favor to close the public hearing?
Aye.
Right. Council, then looking this over, if everything looks to be in good order, it's somewhat of a housekeeping exercise, thanks to our good staff here. Any new council members want to venture and make the motion so that we take away the monopolistic
We're out of control.
motions here with our two veteran council members?
Go for it, Steve.
You got it.
I move to approve resolution number 2024-3-RDA as presented.
That's the next one.
Where am I?
So,
Dash 2-RDA.
It's 2-RDA, sorry, as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a motion by Councilmember Stewart, seconded by Councilmember Jacobs. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. All right, so now we're on to item number 4 of.
Public hearing,
It's
I'll
another
make a
public
motion
hearing.
to open that.
Okay.
Second.
Oh,
Nice.
okay, motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by
Just give them
Councilmember
time.
Stewart to open a public hearing for item number 4. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Now, this is the tentative budget for the RDA for fiscal year 2025.
Lyle, any comments? Right. I'll motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
okay, motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Broderick to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Council, back to you to review the figures. Any questions? You're welcome to inquire about any line items.
just
And
as an FYI, so Kristen mentioned some of these other areas, so let me show you. These are the 2 active areas where we're still collecting taxes specifically for, that come under the umbrella of the RDA. So we're receiving a greater portion of property taxes in these areas than we would otherwise. And so it's not that there's higher taxes or new taxes, it's just we get a greater portion that's siphoned back to the RDA that we can use for infrastructure or incentivizing businesses or other things like
It
that.
comes from the other like Kristen said, the other taxing entities portion of what would normally be but it's still the same collection amount from.
It's the distribution
property owners.
is, yeah, the only thing that has changed, and so the RDA gets an increment of it, and that's why they call it a tax increment.
So this is the area out along 700 North, the CDA boundaries, and the CDA is a type of tax increment area that was once approved by the state and no longer. They've changed these a number of times, and so you'll have, the RDA is the umbrella agency. Within that, you have these different districts that have been created. So there's this one on 700 North, everything in the blue, and then this other one is more recent. This is a CRA, and this one was created specifically for incentives on the new Kia dealership, and so it is a very site-specific tax increment area. And so those are the 2 active areas that we have. So we had some other areas. There was one along State Street, and the lifespan on these in the past has been 20 years. And so you have 20 years to collect that additional tax amount and use it within that district. There is some legislation, Mike just reminded me, that just passed. You have so many years after that district expires to use any remaining funds. And so we'll evaluate that and make sure that we're
Evaluate
doing
those other
that.
funds that are sitting.
Yeah, and there
Put
was
them to
another
good use.
one in an industrial zone just across Geneva Road. It was the Lindon Industrial Business Park. That's come and gone. And then there was one down here, actually, kind of by the Home Depot area, and some of these businesses that were in here. that the city participated and helped put in and pay for a lot of these roadways, helped
And some of the
incentivize the
water
developers.
infrastructure too.
Yeah, and so that one's also expired, but we still have some remaining funds that we're expending, so.
All right. Council, are we ready for a motion then?
I move to approve Resolution 2024-3-RDA as presented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Broderick, seconded by Councilmember Jacobs. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that completes our agenda items. Ready to accept and adjourn?
I move to adjourn the Lindon RDA meeting and reconvene the Lindon City Council meeting.
All right.
A second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Broderick, seconded by Councilmember Stewart. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are now reconvening back into our regular Lindon City Council meeting. And we have, this is our final item, is a closed session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property per Utah code. So this will be closed to the general public. We'll ask the general public to,
We actually need to do a roll call vote to go into that closed
Right.
session, and then we'll
A
excuse
motion
them.
too, right?
Yeah.
so we'll do that, but the recording will be ending upon the start of that closed session. So we'll go ahead and take a motion.
I'll motion that we enter a closed session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property per Utah Code 52-4-205.
I second it.
Motion by Councilmember Hoyt, seconded by Councilmember Jacobs. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then we'll go ahead and once, we do the roll call once we're in the new recording, don't we?
That, I think the roll call is in this recording, so that the public can hear how
Okay,
you
so we'll-
voted.
Jake
Thank you.
Hoyt, aye.
Lincoln Jacobs, aye.
Cole Hooley, aye.
Carolyn Lundberg, aye.
Steve Stewart, aye.
Van Broderick, aye.
Okay, give me just a second to turn off this recording.